Welcome to another episode of the Distributed Data Show, brought to you by DataStax Academy, where we bring you the latest news and interview technical experts to help you succeed at building large-scale distributed systems.
Hi there, I'm Amanda.
I'm Adron.
And this episode, we're really going to focus on one of the major issues about managing state in a multi-cloud architecture. So really, why is this an issue? And why is it a major issue?
Is it an issue? I just thought it was an issue on Tuesday. Yeah.
No, it seems like it's a pretty big issue.
Yeah, it's been around before multi-cloud. I think multi-cloud probably introduces even more thought and concern that needs to be taken into account whenever you're designing an architecture for an application. So I guess the problem is, just to state the obvious, the management of data between your system of record down in your database. You know, you have your DataStax Enterprise cluster and all that stuff is safe, but you have all these different tiers that the data needs to flow through. You might have a CDN with some data that doesn't change a lot, you know, that's just super easy to cache, and then a website goes to it and grabs it whenever it needs it. Prime example, Netflix puts a lot of their movies out in CDNs. The whole multi-gigabyte movie is sitting out on a CDN to make it easier for like East Coast to watch or West Coast. Right, the movie's not changing. Right. It's filmed, it's done, it's shot. So that's great, but then the other stuff might be cached at different tiers throughout their architecture, like the login information, or the, you know, and another solution may be the e-commerce bucket might be have different cache levels of state managed throughout the environment. And in a multi-cloud environment, even though you at some point will write what's in the cart to your data store, your system of record, in the meantime, like for a few seconds here or there, certain elements in your cart would be in this kind of cached state to give that quick performance. Like I'm adding this, removing this, and I need to make sure that stays in sync. So state management for that all the way down is extremely important, but the problem space is extremely complex too because of the different levels and layers in which you need to manage where everything is.
Right.
So
as we've been discussing, and as you've just said to everyone, this is a pretty major issue. But, and like we've been talking, there may be a few best practices in place around this. So we have a few that we've just kind of been brainstorming here.
Yeah.
But, you know, I bet there's way more. And so we would really love to hear from the audience about...
Please add your 2 cents.
Yeah. Give us your comments. Give us your tweets. Really, we're thinking about maybe once we get enough of that, we'll compile a list and we'll blog it. We'll post it.
Yep.
You know, something that other people can benefit from, you know, getting these best practices and getting these pain points.
And in the meantime, though, the ones we've been talking about, specifically, we've been ruminating on domain and how to split down and break apart the domain that you're working in, which really kind of gets us into that microservice space real quick. Also, security, like how do you secure this data? It's all over the place all of a sudden. You have CDN security you have to deal with, you have stuff out in some caching tier, and then you have your stuff in the system of record. Right. Like, how are each of these secured? How are they communicating?
Different cloud architectures, right? Different providers, right?
Right, exactly. So like one provider may have some built-in support for things, another might not. So a lot of variables there. And then the other one that we feel is super obvious, but often overlooked, is testing. You have to test post facto of deployment to production. You need to test before deployment, before you sign off on V1 of anything. Testing is fundamentally important with state management, and especially as you start doing state management across multiple clouds.
Yes.
So
always be testing.
Yeah, always be testing. That's a good one. You got to keep that one planted in your brain. So the first thing with the domains, I think, is a lot of things have been solved with going to microservice architectures because you get to break off and kind of slice a domain into things. You had mentioned, we were talking about a grocery store as a particular domain. And one of the things there is it's kind of easy to think visually of the department or the grocery store broken into its domains. You have like vegetables, you have the meat, you have dairy, you know, whatever it is, snacks.
Right.
And as you break those apart, you can immediately see very specific domains. And you can also see immediate scaling concerns and things like that. Like 4th of July, everybody's going to be trying to barbecue, so the meat section is just going to be going crazy.
Right.
If you break apart your domain, you can scale and manage that state for that domain very specifically to its needs. And you can have like a team or whatnot work on it. So it makes that a best practice,
Right.
which is to break those apart into manageable chunks, departments or whatever within your overall domain.
Right.
If you do that, it makes it dramatically easier to scale the parts that you need scaled.
So it's really what you were kind of saying. It's not just the actual data availability per se, but also the development and the deployment.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of elements that add to basically containerizing or breaking up your domain.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The benefits of breaking it apart efficiently, definitely. It goes far beyond just state management, but
Right.
it is very key for state management itself too.
Absolutely.
So, and then the next thing we were discussing a lot is the security realm of things.
Right. So honestly, security should always be a consideration, and really
Should be.
it always should be. It really has state management is just one of the many elements that you should be focused on security, but security should always be there. And really, but the best practice is what we kind of wanted to highlight here for state management, and kind of with its slightly different flair. So with data kind of being outside of a single place, it's no longer just in your typical database one place. It's going to be, there's going to be numerous of situations and additional layers with now your data being in different places and maybe different, like we said, different cloud providers. Right. It's going to be in different places, so we really need to keep that security as one of our concerns. It's
not like you just put a password on the database and your data is secure.
Exactly. It's going to be moving across channels.
Right. So you got to make sure you get your things encrypted, which we're going to talk about in another episode in depth.
Right.
Been doing a lot of work with that lately.
Right. Is it encrypted on both ways?
Exactly.
Coming and going?
And one of the problems I saw, which just cracked me up, I had worked with a group that did all this work to make sure a thing was encrypted, but then in the endpoints, it wasn't actually encrypted. It was being encrypted post facto of being munged around or whatever. So you had this whole phase where it was just completely open, plain text.
Right.
Then they encrypted it and it rolled out. So in the browser, et cetera, they were fiddling around with stuff. It was all in plain text. Then they encrypted and sent it across the wire. So you could intercept it.
Right. Or the
tricky.
flip of that, right? You have it encrypted on both sides, but then you send it through the wire in clear text. So
that's always
exactly
not a good situation.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
So those are, again, just keeping those things in mind, and especially because data is now moving so many places and more places than you actually originally maybe were thinking of. That definitely has to be a concern. So kind of here, I think we've actually asked a lot more questions around security than we really answered.
Yeah.
But I think if you're just keeping your focus there on security, it's really going to help you.
I think that's a perfect way to state it. Because really, today's security is not tomorrow's security. And it wasn't yesterday's security either, once you get there. Security is a very, very much, even more so a lot of the time than ongoing development, a continuously morphing situation.
Right.
Like you have to stay on top of things. You have to read about it on a regular basis. Even like just set up checkpoints on a weekly basis to like talk shop about what is going on, what you think you have covered, what you don't think you have covered. You're going to be finding new stuff all the time.
Right.
Someone's always coming up with an exploit to figure out how to get into some layer or some abstraction of data.
Right.
So just keeping it at the top of the mind.
Exactly. And now you have so many layers that there's so many other layers to now, So we're going to have another episode around security for multi-cloud architectures. So stay tuned for that.
Because it's top of our mind.
Exactly.
All the time.
That's right. So watch that episode. So let's talk about our kind of some of our best practices, kind of one that I think both of us were pretty passionate about, and that's
Were we?
Testing. I was. Yeah. Testing.
We have to test?
Yes.
Test.
Yes.
Lots of testing.
Why is testing always an afterthought?
It's really weird. I think sometimes testing, And really, these two best practices that we're just talking about, security and then
Yes.
testing,
Yes.
these seem to be such a routine afterthought
Yes.
with so many aspects of software development. But testing needs to really start early, and you need to prototype out things, and you really need to test your different cloud providers.
Right.
You test the connections between them. Test, tons of integration, testing, load testing, whatever.
Yep.
And I think even more so, it's important in a multi-cloud environment because you do testing in one cloud or the other cloud, or you do testing in your application, like you do some integration testing or some unit testing specifically. But then you get out there in these cloud environments, and what you did test for
Yes.
is going to be different in testing versus production.
Right.
And not like a little bit like in application testing, a lot of the time people will do some tests and then production is different. Well, yeah, maybe the data is a little different or whatever.
It's bigger. Yeah.
But the differential on that's small. But you get to multi-cloud and you're talking about literal physical things are different in these providers.
Right.
So the networking is different. The
Right.
pipes between things are different. There's so many new additional things to be concerned about
Right.
that you need tests in place that when you push something out there, you can get real observable feedback from the environment.
Right. There's really no way around giving it a try in the actual environment.
Right.
You're going to find things that you didn't even consider. And if you give yourself enough lead time with your testing to actually do that, you'll have time to fix it.
Right.
As opposed to, okay, we're ready for deployment and...
Right. You can always deploy and follow the age-old practice of deployment and then you test it. I don't suggest that.
Right.
I hope your company survives.
Right.
But that's not the way that is easiest to deal with the ramifications of deployment.
Right.
Testing needs to be upfront. Testing needs to be set up in a way that it is observable once it's in production. You need that whole spectrum covered.
Yeah.
So test, and test some more.
Yeah, I like it, and I agree. So we've talked about just a few. I think today we just had 3 of some of the best practices that we've been discussing.
There's got to be a ton more.
There's got to be a ton more around state management, around expanding it out to just best practices and multi-cloud architectures. So really, please comment, add more. We want to keep talking about it.
Yeah, we want to know your 2 cents. And like mentioned, we'll put them all together and provide it back out for everybody.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
And maybe even make it a living document.
Yeah,
Like security, it'll change a lot.
Yeah, exactly. All righty.
Yeah. I'm Adron.
And I'm Amanda. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you for joining us again for the Distributed Data Show. We love your feedback, so go to the Distributed Data Show page on DataStax Academy and tell us what you think. You can also find us on the DataStax Academy YouTube channel or find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get great podcasts. While you're there, make sure and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.